Hello, School Transportation Nation. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Tony Corbin, publisher and president of STN. This podcast is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, our friends at Adroit, and the Propane Education Research Council. Just a little bit, Mr. Ryan Gray is going to be talking with Brandon Coonrod, the interim director of student transportation for Portland Public Schools. They've lost their director. He was the assistant director, now interim director, and hopefully soon to be director. Right, Ryan?
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk to him in a little bit and talk about a lot about school startup and, of course, how they've overcome the leadership vacuum and how he stepped right in. So
we got some big headlines out of California. We got FCC things coming up. We got lots of conversations, some good stories, tiebacks. Before we get to that, we have a message from TransFinder. Well, the votes are in and STN Expo attendees have spoken. TransFinder was overwhelmingly selected as the best software and best hardware for 2023 at STN Expo in Reno, Nevada. Yes, you heard that right. For the first time ever, TransFinder received the Innovation Choice Award for best hardware. And for the second year in a row, TransFinder has won the best software award, adding to numerous past awards TransFinder has won for its software products. TransFinder's move into hardware was driven by client demand. TransFinder now provides the tablet, the mounts, the card reader, and more as part of its one partner, one solution approach. Guys, you can learn more by visiting transfinder.com or calling them at 800-373-3609 or email them at getplus@transfinder.com and make sure you put STN podcast in the subject line. All right, Ryan, hit us with it. California making some waves. I know we talked about it before with regards to going all electric. We were like on the fence about, is this going to get signed by Governor Newsom? And we got word last week. What happened?
it went through. It got signed. So when we talked about it a few weeks ago, Tony, you were asking me what my thoughts were on passing. I think I said it was going to be like, 90%? I was 90% sure that it would pass. And then I got...
You were wavering.
I got worried there because I was starting to read some articles. I read an article in the LA Times that quoted an organization saying, "Oh, well, no, we're afraid that it's got too much opposition." So essentially, Assembly Bill 579, what it does is by 2035, all new school bus purchases in the state of California must be zero emissions. Today, that means electric. Tomorrow, we don't know quite what that could mean, but right now we know that that's electric school buses. A little bit different than some of the other requirements that we've seen, state laws. Now, of course, the big one out there, New York, they must have all, supposedly, allegedly, school buses be zero emissions by 2035. They need to start purchasing 2027. But here in California, Governor Newsom signed the bill, and by 2035, all new purchases must be electric. Now, what was interesting about this, or there were several interesting things, but why I was a little bit concerned about my prognostication that it would pass was a lot of education associations in the state opposed it. So I know that I spoke with the California Association of School Business Officials. They were opposed to it. They picked out several concerns, namely the cost, of course, of the school buses, the reliability of the electric grid. They talked about some service requirements, maintenance issues, where some of these buses are on the sidelines for 4 to 6 months or even longer. And they're unable to get those buses fixed. So what happens? What do they use? Especially a lot of these funds out there that are available either on the state level, Clean School Bus, include scrappage of older diesel buses. If these districts get rid of these buses, but then these electric buses aren't ready to roll, they don't have the infrastructure ready, or there's bugs that are being worked out, what do they do next? But the climate folks won out on this one, so it goes into effect. It's a lot of money, Tony. Basically, California has just shy of 24,000 school buses, 23,800, and change. And this is both public and private statewide. It's going to cost about $5 billion total to flip that fleet over to
It's a lot of dough, Ryan. That's a lot of dough. That's as much as the federal program now, right?
It feels like, the Powerball, basically. I mean, similar numbers. I mean, but what's crazy about it is, so this bill, basically addresses 20,200 of them, because there's about 500 already on the road. And then there's another 3,100 or so that are dedicated or committed. Now, we already have in the state an additional $1.5 billion that the legislature approved last year with the state budget. So that money is there as well. So you're looking at probably, another $3.5 billion over the next, decade plus to do this. But, there's still has to be a lot done. And, I was talking to folks last week at the California Association of School Transportation Officials Business Forum down in Garden Grove, Southern California. And, a lot of the conversation was around, like, how are we going to make this happen? Now, California has historic home to school transportation funding that last year's budget also made available. So basically, school districts are getting double the reimbursement that they had for the last several decades. So that helps. And then, of course, California is flush with grant funds. There's just, everywhere you turn, there's a bunch of grant funds. But ultimately, it comes down to the infrastructure. And we keep talking about this over and over again, and, how important that infrastructure is. But, folks are still getting school buses, electric school buses, and the infrastructure is not ready. The electric power utilities are telling school districts it's going to take 12 months, 18 months, sometimes up to 2 years to complete projects. And that just does not work when you are actively purchasing school buses or using incentive programs, rebates to bring those buses in. The OEMs obviously across the board have really ramped up production, and they're going to have to continue that to really keep up with the demand. But, it's outpacing what we're seeing the electric utility providers able to do.
Yeah, for me, Ryan, it's interesting because I saw a couple other headlines last week about Joe Biden approving $7 billion for hydrogen hubs around the United States, which I thought, okay, someone had asked me kind of jovially, hey, you know what, hydrogen school buses? And I thought, you know what, that's pretty far away. There's a lot of money. The industry's kind of made its bet on electric. So we'll see how that develops as a zero emission energy source in the future. But clearly, the United States is making investments to build out infrastructure in multiple zero emission forms because electric at this point in its current state, as we'll all agree, the grid can't support what we're seeing. And that's only going to get exacerbated by some of these regulatory moves to make all school buses electric. Now, other people say, hey, school buses are batteries on wheels. How do we harness that energy? How do we take that and then repurpose that energy back to the grid, right? That's the whole promise of V2G that we discussed. And is that even possible? How are we going to realize that? And our districts, frankly, even invested into that vision as, their mission is not being a battery on wheels. Their mission is getting kids to and from and an extension of the classroom and all those sorts of things. So this is the rub that people see out there. There's multiple agendas at play, but here we are, Ryan, a big move. Golden State going green. Yep. We know they're pro-green, but man, this is a big move pushing all your chips in.
Absolutely. And then fact checking myself. So I said 3,100 electric school buses are committed. No, that's about a little over 2,000, almost 2,100. So another 1,100 or so buses will be paid for with that 1.5 billion over 3 years that the state legislature approved last year. But to your point about hydrogen, you said it's not ready yet for school buses. It's not ready yet, number one, but the big thing, cost. Hydrogen, if you think electric is expensive, I mean, hydrogen, you see that a lot in transit. And this is, transit, of course, is getting billions of dollars a year and has for decades from the federal government. These hydrogen transit buses cost upwards of $1 million. So you think $450,000 electric school bus is bad, just double that. And then you add in the infrastructure. Hydrogen infrastructure is even, more invasive, if you will. If you look at what a lot of folks did with CNG, that infrastructure is a lot more than, of course, certainly diesel. And I'm even hearing from some folks that aside from the electric grid aspect of it, that the CNG infrastructure can even be more costly as well. So if, a lot of folks had serious concerns about that kind of infrastructure, just imagine hydrogen. Now, I've mentioned this before on the podcast. We've had this in a couple articles back in the spring at ACT Expo. I spoke with Amy Davis of Accelera by Cummins, their new zero emissions business segment that was announced earlier this year. And I asked her about hydrogen because obviously hydrogen, those electrolyzers, that's a big part of the Accelera business, in addition to all electric batteries and the drive systems and integrating all that. But her point on, at least for school buses, was that hydrogen was just way too expensive, and that maybe we would get to a point one day where hydrogen fuel cell could supplement electric batteries, because that's really all it is electric fuel cells. You're using electric fuel cells to power those onboard batteries rather than plugging in and getting it off the grid. So from that aspect, maybe one day we will see fuel cells. And I know there's other technology out there too, range extenders and whatnot, but I think it's going to take a lot of different technologies to come together to really, push this across the finish line. But what we know now is just there's still oodles of money being thrown out there. We've talked about obviously the EPA rebate that's ongoing right now. If you guys haven't, gotten to read that, stnonline.com. You have till the end, basically, of January. They extended that, EPA did, because of the potential government shutdown. And then, of course, we don't know. We won't even talk about, that extension. That could, change some things there. But, back to what California is doing, it's still very aggressive, and we'll see how it plays out. Now, of course, they have a head start on every other state basically in the nation, and a lot of folks at least already know a lot more about electric than in other states. And again, there's so many funds there available in California. It'll be really interesting to see what happens over this next 11 years or so.
Yeah, the other friend is propane, right? We've got renewable propane. We've got that expanding in California. I wonder if we don't see more of that expansion, kind of some of these states that are going into this all zero emission funding, because, right, if the funding is only going to electric, where's that leave propane in California? Where's that leave propane in New York? So it'll be very interesting to see that come full circle. The industry clearly knows it needs to be in a certain place with the fuel source. It's just access to that fuel, right?
It's access.
And it's a chemistry too, right? There are certain things that they're adding into the fuel to reduce the carbon index to get it to meet that test by the government, by the state to qualify for that particular funding. So I think it's probably a matter of time, Ryan, that they solve that problem. But definitely we're seeing that more, because right now with the engine providers, Roush is really the only propane engine offering on the market. Now that PSI is kind of off the board, Navistar isn't offering the PSI anymore, nor is Thomas. They're all waiting for the Cummins propane to come out, their kind of flex fuel engine. And that's still out there in the distance, right? 2025 at the soonest that we'll see. And I believe gasoline will be the first one that enters the market. So
Next year. Yeah.
for now, if you're interested in propane, Bluebird's really the only game in town, particularly on the large big bus, class 6, class 7. So we'll see how that ends up playing out in the market.
Yeah.
And I know we got at the TSD conference, we got the Propane Education Research Council doing a lunch and learn, talking a little more about propane energy and the success stories, specifically in special needs too, which is interesting. So we got a lot coming up. That TSD conference coming up November 15th through the 20th. So guys, if you haven't registered yet, you still got time. We've got that registration open. The early bird's passed, but we got fabulous content, really good stuff. You guys can learn a lot. The agenda's up there. Ryan's been working hard with the team of the Brain Trust, we'll call them, Ryan, of experts. The council is helping derive. Yeah, tenured faculty. They've got your back in curating the best content possible for everybody to get the ultimate in special needs training.
Absolutely. Well, back to, you were talking about the engine availability and something else out there that's affecting a lot of states right now. So the California Air Resources Board, essentially, for lack of a better word, has put its heavy duty low NOx omnibus rule on hold. There's some wheeling and dealing going on right now. We've already understood that we know that Oregon, one of those, I think it's 17 states that follow CARB regulations, they have postponed their January 1st, 2024 date, where they switched over, and we're going to require all new school bus purchases, as well as a bunch of other commercial trucks and whatnot, to follow those CARB rules, which means no more diesel. And they've pushed that back to 2025 because CARB right now, they're basically working with the engine manufacturers to try to determine what kind of engines are going to be available. And to your point, there's a limited number of engines available to folks. And you just can't, go out and mandate yet, especially with this law, that everything goes to zero emissions. So there's a lot of wheeling and dealing going on. I was talking with someone at Castle last week and got a little bit of skinny on that. I guess even the port of Los Angeles and is involved in that, and talking about, because so much of these regulations go on drayage, right? And these heavy trucks that are operating at ports. So they're looking at potentially losing a lot of business to Houston, where a lot of shipping companies can go because they don't have the same regulations that CARB is trying to push through. So a lot of wheeling and dealing. CARB is not one to back off their stance, but I know there's a lot of serious discussions right now, and that school districts are looking at that. And they're telling me, Ryan, we don't have any or many other engine options right now. So what do we do? So it's a lot of TBD out there. And as I said, there's a lot of states that are affected by this. So interesting times, definitely.
Excellent, guys. All right, well, we got some great headlines coming up. We'll be talking to FCC here in a second. Before we get to that, we got a message from the Propane Education Research Council. All right, guys, we have a great green tip for you this week, brought to you by the Propane Education Research Council. They want to talk to you about propane. It's energy for everyone. Did you know that school buses fueled by propane can help you reduce emissions in your community while saving you money? Propane school buses have a lower average carbon intensity than electric school buses over their lifetime by more than half, and they emit up to 96% less nitrogen oxide than diesel buses. All of this from fleets with the lowest total cost of ownership. It's no wonder propane is the most widely used alternative fuel in the school bus industry. You guys can learn more at betterourbuses.com. That's betterourbuses.com. All right, we're back, Ryan. So I know, guys, we talked about this last week. We talked about FCC. specifically E-rate funding for school bus Wi-Fi. And there's a vote coming up on October 19th specifically to this. And so Ryan and I, again, we're prognosticating, hey, does this have a chance to pass? And Ryan brought me up to speed and said, hey, it was split. It was 2-2, two Democrats, two Republicans, and there really wasn't a fifth member on the FCC committee. And, one was assigned, Ryan, and it's another Democrat, right? So now, presumably, now they've got 3 votes to 2, and the potential of this passing is exponentially higher.
Absolutely. That's what I'm hearing. So as you were mentioning, the FCC board for a couple years now, several years, had only 4 members of the 5, and 2 Republicans, as you mentioned, 2 Democrats. Last month, the Senate confirmed Ana Gomez to that 5th seat. She is a Democrat. So Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel has the votes she needs to push through this proposal. And this was really, something that she was championing. I think that they were waiting to, try to get that 3rd Democrat confirmed. And they wanted to do that while Biden was still in office, at least. We'll see how the presidential election shakes out in the coming months. But the folks I'm talking to are saying that, this is going to be basically a slam dunk. And what we noticed last week, Tony, FCC was kind of going on a roadshow. Rosenworcel was meeting with some Democrat legislators. They were going to school districts that have Wi-Fi, talking about the benefits, talking about extension of the classroom, talking about addressing the homework gap, addressing the needs of rural students that don't have any or as reliable broadband as a lot of other students in the nation. So it certainly looks like they're preparing for a victory lap. They're setting the stage. So definitely, as we're recording this, the board has yet to formally meet, but they will shortly after this comes out. So definitely we'll start unpacking things as we get details.
Got it. Also, Ryan, I know in the October issue, you had written a more in-depth article about the potential regulatory considerations made for alternative student transportation and TNCs. And the NCST is meeting in 2025 in April, if I'm not mistaken. Is it April or May?
May of 2025. Yeah.
May of 25. There we go. And you had mentioned in that article in the October issue some of the things that are coming down the pipeline, obviously with the advent or the increased use of alternative transportation TNCs. There's a lot of gray area, and there's got to be some standardization out there. And I know you had mentioned that there's another bill in California that is touching on some of this stuff in terms of what they're requiring these companies to do or to be compliant with. You want to enlighten the audience a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So the article in October, and I have a correction that I made, and we put it out in e-news, and we updated the online articles, the Digipub, where I inaccurately described a new law in Colorado, actually, that went into effect earlier this year, that basically tries to level some of the playing field there. And basically, so looking really at the difference between transportation network companies and quote unquote alternative transportation companies, right? What's the difference? So I tried to, in that article, spell out the differences, because there are differences. A lot of folks that I talk to, they lump them all together. Most student transporters, I don't think, really understand what these companies are or what they do. But I did misquote the law. I think I said that in Colorado that TNCs could not transport students with disabilities under the IEP. That is false. So I did correct that.
Fake news. What? No.
A lot of school districts, though, do not allow them to, and school districts can do what they want to do, right? They can go above and beyond. A very important point in that. So Colorado created a school transportation network company medical form that has to be filled out. There is some, approved training. So the public utility commissions basically everywhere are the ones that oversee these companies. So transportation network company, think of Uber and Lyft, right? Uber and Lyft traditionally hasn't transported students, though. Now that's changing a little bit as well. I mentioned that in the article. Uber made an announcement earlier this year that they are in certain cities, test cities, transporting students or kids between the ages of 13 and 17 without parents. Because right now, kids have to be supposedly, allegedly, with parents. I've talked about this in the past. Our office is right next door to a high school, and on the other side of us is a Wendy's. And at 2:30, 2 o'clock every day, it looks like Grand Central Station with all the Ubers and Lyfts pulling in there to pick up these kids. But they are not allowed to go and pick up kids at school. There's ways around that, of course. And there was I believe it was a New York Times article that I read last year that looked at that. And it quoted a student who said, hey, you know what? Yeah, I get an Uber every day. I can't get them. They can't pick me up at school. So I just walk across the street to the library and they pick me up there. So, people always find a way around things. But certainly what NCST is trying to do is they're trying to address this and say, hey, we have all these different states that are doing these different things or nothing at all and not regulating at all. We need to provide some guidance. And it's been rather controversial and contentious. There's school bus purists out there who say, heck no, all kids all the time in yellow school buses. But as we know, that's just not realistic anymore, especially with the driver shortage. But when it comes to especially transporting students with disabilities, the most government regulated, federal regulated aspect of this industry, it really changes things. So what's interesting, we went to press before Governor Newsom signed into law SB 88. So he had another law. And what's really standing out to me with this one, this is the first one to my knowledge that requires drug and alcohol testing of these transportation network company drivers. So these transportation network company drivers differ from your quote unquote alternative transportation, because these TNC drivers are essentially like your Uber driver, your Lyft driver, DoorDash. They're independent contractors driving their own vehicles. So there's a lot of questions that go just right there with these folks with their qualifications and their vehicles and whatnot. Now, PUC does require that certain vehicle inspection forms get filled out. In the companies that are working with school districts have their own requirements. And certainly, again, school districts can require whatever they want. But in terms of like a blanket statement, this law really, is the first, again, to my knowledge, that has that drug and alcohol requirement in there. Whereas before, they would have to get background checked. But everything that I've seen from these companies or from other laws or regulations out there is essentially zero tolerance on alcohol and drugs. Zero tolerance, though, as someone told me recently, zero tolerance is passive. That's after the fact. That's just making a statement. We have zero tolerance, and if we find out, they're no longer driving for us. Well, how do we preclude those folks from driving to begin with? And that's where school bus safety really shines, because we know how stringent the drug and alcohol testing is. And alternative transportation companies, by and large, have to adhere to those same state Department of Education requirements for student transporters. So very similar requirements as school bus drivers and school bus vehicles have. Now, the vehicles, of course, are different. But in terms of licensing, maybe not the commercial driver's license, but a lot of the training. So this law really, brings a lot of that to these TNCs as well. So I know it was being fought by actually a lot of school districts and TNCs as well. A lot of the education folks were championing it. So it did go through. So we will now see certainly a lot of work needs to be done to start codifying everything. But this law goes into effect January 1st, 2024. Now, it's important to note that existing contracts before that can continue on as written. But if they need to be renewed, they're going to be following under this new law. So certainly, I would imagine that the TNCs out there operating in California are going to be scurrying about to try to get these any new contracts or amended contracts on the books before that January 1st deadline, because certainly, it's not their business model. This is not how they were, originally formed to adhere to these extra regulations. Now, a lot of folks though say you're transporting the most important, most fragile goods in the nation. You need to do these things, so that's why it's been so controversial. But it'll be really interesting to see how this law starts taking shape.
Yeah, very interesting headlines, Ryan. Lots of good stuff this week. Guys, Ryan's going to be talking to Brandon Coonrod from Portland Public Schools in Oregon next. Before that, we have a message from our partner, Adroit. Adroit is an alternative student transportation platform that complements the school bus and helps districts with their special needs and McKinney-Vento transportation for students utilizing its fleet of specialized vehicles. Adroit provides world-class technology that connects all stakeholders involved in student transportation transactions. The company provides transportation solutions for school districts, counties, non-public schools, and school busing agencies to assist their special transportation needs. You can learn more at goadroit.com. That's GoAdroit, spelled ADROIT.com. GoAdroit.com.
I want to welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage Brandon Coonrod, the interim Director of Transportation, Portland Public Schools in Oregon. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Absolutely. And your beard. So the folks, I jest, but the folks who aren't seeing Brandon right now, he has a magnificent beard. I've already been, trying to prod you to come out to STN Expo Reno as a speaker. You absolutely have to come now. I see this glorious beard you have. You're not allowed to shave. So you're going to have to come out next summer. So I just imagine what it's going to look like by that time.
Oh, man. I've actually had this beard for 11 plus years now. I have people in my life that wouldn't know me if I shaved this thing. My beard precedes me. I'm not even allowed to shave it anymore, so it won't be going anywhere.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Literally, you think Pacific Northwest, you see Brandon, and it all makes sense, right there. So anyways, as I mentioned, interim Director of Transportation for Portland Public Schools, a title you've had for, I want to say 3-ish months, maybe a little bit longer at this point.
Yeah, roughly about 3.5 months, somewhere in there. Okay. I don't even know if I can count at this point. So
your previous title was Assistant Director of Transportation. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing as Assistant Director.
Assistant Director. I was really, I kind of fell into the role because I was doing a lot of kind of project-based stuff for transportation. I focused a lot on our GPS systems, on our video systems for our buses, really changing over what we were using for the old guard and turning something new. That kind of just led into bigger projects, which ended up being EV. That's been my focus for the last handful of years now, as everybody in the nation is trying to get a hold of these things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I did day-to-day with people. I was really out with my team regularly, working in the operation. During COVID, I was driving a bus like everybody else was, taking meetings in between routes.
Okay, so did you join Portland in 2018, I guess? How did you get involved with the district? What's your background, if you can share that with our audience?
Yeah, my background is actually, I started from a trucking industry. I started driving semis when I was 21 and enjoyed it, but knew that wasn't where I wanted to be. I had worked with large trucking companies like LTL Freight, ended up jumping into supervising for a number of years. And then I just felt like it was time for a switch, and I wanted to do something for an industry that did good for others instead of making a profit. And so in 2018, I made the jump. It was a lateral move at the time, but I knew I wanted to go upward.
Absolutely.
So Portland Public Schools was a great location for me.
Great. And, obviously there's a lot of benefits working for a public school district and the government and getting some of those benefits, which I'm sure is something that you all there at Portland Public Schools pitch to new driver applicants. Like most folks, there's been a little thing called the driver shortage that I guess it's really always affected the industry, but coming out of COVID, it got especially bad. What's the current state of affairs up in Portland in terms of both drivers and just staff in general?
Yeah, the state of affairs for drivers is actually much better here. I kind of have to tread lightly and make sure people don't get too disgruntled about it because we don't have that much of a driver shortage like most places. Our drivers, they're paid pretty well. And so we seem to retain them. People love the job here. I think it actually speaks more to our culture than anything, though. That's one thing when I came in that I was told that, the culture was a little lacking. And I was like, perfect. I'm a culture person. Let's do this. And we've grown it. And I think it's shown. We have typically 1 to 2 people down right now. I think we hired 7 or 8 over the summer as people, retire and move on. But our bigger struggle actually has been trying to get enough trainers, trying to get people through the system that can actually train those drivers coming in.
Absolutely.
We're doing better with it. And our contractors, they're stabilizing with their drivers as well. Our system has 2 contractors plus the district driving to compile all of our drivers for the district.
Okay, but I was about to bring that up because I was going to mention that I believe that you guys had a mixed fleet there, or mixed operations in terms of contractor and in-house. Tell us a little bit about that. So, what facets are in-house? What facets are outsourced?
So in-house, we do all of our sped transportation. We have STA on our west side of the district, and we have First Student on the east side of the district. It's split kind of by the Willamette River, but we do have a little portion that bleeds over the opposite direction. STA and First Student do all of our GT busing and a small portion of our ST busing. And then we also comprise the rest of our transportation through cab companies that we have our own program that they come through and they learn how our way is, and they go through and are vetted through our security background checks and everything. Additionally, we have TriMet, which is our local public transit, and they transport about half of our students, our high school students, about 10,000 of them ride that per day.
Okay. In terms of, so you mentioned that the special needs busing is all in-house. How many students are we talking about? Are you transporting? We've seen, a rise in the number of students with disabilities being identified just as having disabilities with an IEP, and then of course needing the related service of transportation, as well as homelessness and foster youth. What do your numbers look like in terms of those students?
You're right. They definitely are on the rise. We've seen over the past few years an increase of people moving into Portland that have those needs. So our numbers typically are rising quite a bit. I want to say we're somewhere just over 900 students that we transport with special needs of some sort. And, our McKinney-Vento, our students that have experienced homelessness, there's different programs that reach them. But yeah, it's a challenge trying to match the needs of them. And we don't just do Portland Public Schools. We also go to our neighboring districts. We have some schools we go to that are 30, 40 miles away that we take students that have been displaced from their homes, but still need access to their school.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned electric buses. And in terms of that range, I would imagine you're probably not using those electric buses on those routes because a lot of those folks that we talk to, that sweet spot of maybe, 50 miles, and closer, you don't want to go much farther than that. Talk a little bit more about the electric buses. I know you just received yours not too long ago, I think in the springtime, or at least an order of them. What are you guys looking at in terms of electric school buses? How many do you have? And, let's talk a little bit about infrastructure, the challenges maybe that you guys are trying to overcome.
Yeah, we've been really lucky actually that we have Portland General Electric in Portland, and they have been amazing to work with. And our property actually lies on Pacific Power land, and they have been equally amazing to work with. So I know people say that they have trouble with their utilities sometimes. We have two utilities that service our district, and both of them have been phenomenal to work with. They're there every step of the way. They have been the supplier of the grants through a DEQ Clean Energy Fund. And we've been able to receive 2 buses last spring, like you said. And then just after spring, a couple months after, we received our 3rd bus. So we now have 3 green power buses on property. We also have the infrastructure set up currently for 5 buses. And we have 2 more conduits already laid out in that groundwork. So we prepped ahead. We have another charger coming with 2 more spots. So that'll give us a total of 7 spaces, which actually works out perfect because Multnomah County funded us another bus and Portland Public Schools decided to pay for 1 on our own. And then PGE and Pacific Power just helped us with another, essentially 4 buses through a couple different grants.
Okay.
So we have a total of 7 coming, and we have exactly enough infrastructure pre-planning.
Okay. So are any of the buses in there? They're all relatively new. Have any of them actually been en route yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the green power buses are here on site, and they've been running routes. They ran a couple routes last year, very briefly, and this year they're running as normal. And it's been really nice seeing them, actually. I've left out of here a couple times to go to a meeting or something, and I follow along with it and roll the windows down just to be like, I don't hear a thing. It's great.
So what are you guys seeing in terms of the operations? I mean, we've heard a lot about obviously maintenance costs. They're more projected long term because these buses are new, right? So you guys really aren't seeing a lot of that and won't for a while because of warranty work that the dealers are probably doing for you guys. But in terms of the operations, you probably have enough data now to just know what the range is looking like, and also to the driver feedback.
We barely have enough data because they're so new. We're realizing that, that 100-mile range is ideal conditions. And for the most part, I think we have pretty ideal conditions here. So I think we're going to get that range, but we haven't been able to really test them to the fullest like we'd like to. Winter is coming, and the heaters are really the player in there. So I definitely think we're going to start testing it a little bit more coming up here.
I had a Game of Thrones moment just now looking at your beard when you said that. But that aside, back to the EVs, also too, a lot of it hinges on driver training. So, I would imagine like over the summer, did you take a lot of those buses? Did you, again, you only had a handful. But how did you guys start tackling the driver training? Was it something that you tried to kind of work into maybe some of your in-services or whatnot, just kind of, starting to get your drivers and your staff acclimated and kind of, looking under the hood, so to speak, kicking the tires?
Yeah, I was actually able to take the bus out myself and drive it a little bit. And then I also asked our team that kind of deals with our climate goals and said, what can we do with this bus? And we actually were able to take it to a couple different events and use it as a teaching tool. And interestingly enough, I was able to learn from it while I was doing it. So I was able to teach some of our drivers kind of how it works, the little bit of differences, the little intricacies that might happen. I was also able to give Green Power some feedback on things that I might have liked to see a little bit better or different. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of nice because it's a new company that's coming up and they make a great product, but they're new to the market. They're not, a Thomas, which is what our next electric vehicles are coming. That's what we've ordered.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you mentioned DEQ earlier, Department of Environmental Quality. I've been in contact with them recently because, as I mentioned earlier with Tony, when we were starting off this podcast, talking about CARB, the California Air Resources Board. Oregon's one of the, a handful of states, I think, 17 states that follows CARB regulations. you guys were staring at a January 1st, 2024 regulation, which essentially you weren't going to be able to buy diesel anymore. Oregon DEQ has now pushed that back a year because of some delays CARB is having. Curious, you've talked about the electric buses you have. What else are you looking to do, or what are you using or looking to buy in terms of some of the other fuels?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, actually, because Portland Public Schools is in a really unique position, a little good and a little bad. In the early 80s, Portland Public Schools went to propane as a main fuel source. And we've had years where we've had to buy propane and then supplement it with gas buses because we just didn't have enough propane available, or the chassis weren't there, whatever that case may be. But in general, we've been able to purchase propane throughout. So the diesel regulations don't really affect us technically. Our district has about 5 transit buses at each contractor that actually are diesel for those long trips, because we know propane won't make it. And right now, electric's not making it either. So we're realistic in it. We know that there is a little bit of problem there that we're going to see. We were actually able to reach out to our dealers locally and have our local Opta group with the dealers meet with DEQ and discuss our concerns about this. So I think we're making some headway there, and we're going to have our voice heard a little bit better. I do think they're still looking at the new date, but they are at least listening to us. So maybe we can get some more pushback on that.
Okay, great. And so we were talking about the driver shortage a little bit earlier, and technology. So you mentioned you touched on technology, GPS. That's kind of how you first started, getting involved with transportation in Portland. But talk a little bit more about the initiatives, the technology initiatives at Portland right now, especially amid school startup. So now here it is, it's late October. You guys, the dust has settled a little bit from school startup. But you were indicating to me previously that school startup went pretty well. So how much did technology play into that? And what are some of the initiatives you guys are looking to expand upon or maybe introduce?
Yeah, startup did go well. I want to knock on wood right now because that's something you don't usually hear. So I do think our technology plays a big piece in it, though. We have Synovia or CalAmp for our GPS systems. We've had Gatekeeper for a number of years now for our camera systems. They've all been pretty rock solid. Some of these things are still relatively new. I know what we'd like to move forward to eventually is actually doing some ridership and knowing everybody's scanning on that bus, and we know if they're getting on the wrong bus, and we know when they get off at their house and that they're at the right stop. Those are things we haven't quite implemented yet, just due to kind of having some of this stuff be new. But those are the things that I want to lean towards and actually start implementing and really just putting technology in the forefront, which is something that I think we've been lacking in Portland for a long time.
And what about like the integration? So you're mentioning you have your 2 contractors in addition to your internal operations for your special education routes. What kind of collaboration is necessary when, are they necessarily using the same technology? Is it talking to each other? Because I would imagine this is all funneling into reports that you and your office need to be culling monthly, daily, weekly, and it doesn't matter, where it's originating from. It's all, they're Portland Public School kids. So
yeah. I mean, it's all perfect. Everything's integrated together and all of our teams work exactly in sync. No, it doesn't work that way at all. Yeah, we have multiple different things that are all lined out differently. So one of our contractors uses a different product. The other contractor uses the same product, but it's a little different than the one we use. So yeah, there's a lot of hiccups in there. We've had to do some interesting stuff that honestly I understand, but I couldn't explain exactly how they do it. Mm-hmm. But we are being able to pull that data, even though they're coming from different companies. There are ways to do it. So if people are listening and they're saying it's not possible, go back to your teams and tell them it is possible. Just dig deeper and somebody will find you the answer. We've been able to get those connections to get on-time reporting from other companies that flow in. All of it works through our systems. It's a challenge every day for sure. And there's always times where something doesn't download right, or this didn't populate, or whatever that may be. But yeah, overall, it's been pretty successful.
That's great. Communication. I'm sure.
Yep.
And I couldn't let you leave without asking you. So we mentioned you're the interim director of transportation. How's the search going for the official director of transportation? And might that person be sitting here talking to me right now?
It's going good. We did put it on kind of a little bit of a hiatus, sort of, just while we tried to finish up startup and really make sure that we got kids to school on time, safely, and to the right schools. That's obviously the most important part. But yeah, now that we've done that, we're back on it and digging through those. I did pull my name out of it. I wanted to initially, but we felt like all of us talked and we really want to bring somebody in that has a lot of technical know-how. I do think while I love my job and I would love to be here long term, I still have some things to learn. And I'd be a fool to think that I knew what I was doing every inch of the way. And I've learned a lot in the interim role, and I expect somebody who comes in to be really well polished and hopefully be able to teach me even more so that I can step into it eventually.
Excellent. All right. Well, good. I threw that one out there for you. So, but I appreciate the candor and I'm looking forward to some great things from both you as well as Portland Public Schools, kind of as you guys flip the page and head into the future. You guys got a lot of cool stuff going on. So as I mentioned to Brandon earlier, got to get him out to STN Expo Reno. And of course, folks, before you know it, that is going to be coming up. But first, TSD Conference, tsdconference.com. Head over to the website, register today. Brandon, hopefully we'll see you there or some staff from Portland. But if not, looking forward to getting you out to Reno.
Yeah, I would love to get back out there. I've been there a couple times and it's been amazing, the knowledge that I've got from it. So I will do everything that I can to get there.
Great.
Once we get this spot filled, it'll be a lot easier for me.
Awesome. All righty. Well, thanks so much, Brandon. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Ryan, Brandon, great conversation today. Appreciate everything you guys shared with us. Ryan, great headlines too, man. Lots of votes coming up, guys. Keep an eye on stnonline.com for all that great information on if we're going to see that FCC approved Wi-Fi. Can't wait for that. All the great energy things happening in the market. Lots of happenings in the area of alternative transportation and TNCs. So can't wait to see what happens. Always an exciting day in school transportation. Guys, this podcast sponsored by TransFinder, the Propane Education Research Council, and Adroit. We thank them for being our partner and sponsor. Be sure and check out their website. If you email them, mention we heard you on the STN podcast. We always love that support, guys. Love that back. STNonline.com for all the latest news and analysis in the school transportation industry. Guys, you can always listen to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Every week, we're here, Nation, for you. We love you. We'll see you next week.